Welcome to the Planning Committee for the 4th of March 2025. We've got only 2 applications before us today, which is a change from what we've had recently. So we go to the meeting itself. I'm Councillor Phil Murphy, Chair of the committee, and Dale.
Hi, I'm Dale Rook, and I'm Vice Chair of the Planning Committee.
Amy.
Good afternoon, Amy Longford, Head of Planning.
Philip Thomas, Development Services Manager.
Andrew Jones, Development Management Area Manager.
Joanne Chase, Solicitor to the Planning Committee.
Richard Ray, Paralegal.
Richard Williams, Democratic Services.
Thank you for that. I've got a message on my screen that it's very quiet online. Is that the problem with everybody? No, everybody okay?
No, fine. Sounds fine. I'm fine.
Right, okay, thanks a lot. We go to the minutes then and to the agenda, and apologies, Richard.
Yes, Chair, apologies from Councillor Riley, and I believe Jill Bond may be having technical issues.
Okay, thank you for that. Any declarations of interest? Can't imagine any on these, but no, okay, thank you very much. The minutes of the previous meeting, is everybody content with those? In which case, Councillor McConnell and Councillor Powell, thank you very much. So we now go to the instructions. Can everybody remember that their cameras must be on at all times, otherwise we're not going to be able to vote? And
edged red on the plan, but the actual ownership boundary or land owned by the surgery is edged in blue. So you can see this peripheral area as well there. So the existing lighting that's fitted on 7 poles of 3.6 metres high at the surgery and its car park has proved to be intrusive and has led to complaint from neighbouring properties. So in order to address that, new lighting is proposed, which would be LED lights, but at a much lower lux than the existing, and positioned so as not to spread the light to surrounding areas. And the new lighting would similarly sit on the top of the existing lighting poles. There's 7 in total across the car park. And there you can see 4 behind the surgery, 3 on the access road up to the surgery, which we drove up yesterday as part of the site visit. And that's a typical photo showing the existing lighting and the lighting poles. And that's the proposed replacement lighting that has been submitted as an amendment to this scheme to address the concerns of residents. There's also an illuminance diagram that shows how the lighting would spread across the site. So you can see it be concentrated within the areas that are needed to be lit, i.e. the car park and the immediate surrounds and environs of the building and the access up to it, while the peripheral areas would remain as dark corridors. So that would prove to be effective for the safe operation of the premises, but as said, prevent light spill that would otherwise cause nuisance to neighbours. And in addition, they would be switched off via a timer so as not to be lit after the premises is closed. There is a planning condition requiring the lights to be switched off between 9 p.m. and 7 a.m. The lighting would also help local wildlife by restoring darker corridors to the vegetated boundaries of the site, and it's known that bats are present in the area. There is no objection now from the council's ecologists given the lighting assessment submitted and the proposed change to the lighting and the timing of the lighting. There is also a condition requiring the new LED lights to be installed within 3 months of the date of any permission granted to ensure that they are replaced. And in view of these positive changes, it's got some more photos there. You can see where the lighting is. It's relatively close to the edge of the site. You can see there, so it needs to be more concentrated. And again there. And again there. So in view of the positive changes responding to local concerns, officers recommend approval of this application subject to the 5 conditions set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. And those of us who were there yesterday could certainly see what the residents' point was. The local member is Councillor Birch. Councillor Birch?
Thank you, Chair. In fact, the local member for the site in question is Councillor Wright, but it's residents of Penny Pound who are impacted. So I was asked to speak on behalf of residents in Penny Pound. Their property is actually between Penny Pound and Chapel Road, and they have been severely impacted by the current lights which shine very brightly. I've seen it myself, very brightly into their home. I do feel that the proposed lights will be a great improvement, very much more what should have been perhaps provided in the first place, and but have asked though that the condition is applied, that I think the intention is that the lights will go off as the cleaners leave and be there, you know, when staff are arriving on the dark mornings. I think because of the elevated site, there is a real detrimental impact of the current lighting on the adjoining properties, which has caused them great distress.
Okay, thank you for that. I think we've actually put the times in the condition, haven't we, Phil?
Yes. 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. switched off. It wasn't online there. 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. The lights won't be operational.
Sorry, Chair, may I ask whether the lights will be on at the weekends when the surgery is closed?
We could, make add a bit of detail to the condition, saying it's well, I don't suppose it would be open on a Saturday evening, would it? The surgery, they tend to be open in the morning only on a Saturday, but we can certainly phrase it so that it's managed at weekends as well, if members are minded to require that as part of the vote.
Okay, well, as Democratic Services are demoted you, Laura, do you want to add anything to what Councillor Birch has said, or do you?
Only just to concur that I have also had residents, when particularly the landlord of the Station Hotel next to this proposal, who has also raised some concerns about the current lighting, but who I hope will feel a little more comfortable by the proposed new reduced lighting and the times they'll be off overnight.
Okay, thanks for that. I've got nobody at the moment. Councillor Howells.
Just regards the condition, really. So, how can we be sure that the curfew would be adhered to and not, fall foul of human error? Will it be an electronic sort of timer, or so that it will automatically go off, rather than relying on somebody to turn a switch off, which can be forgotten?
Yeah, I mean, how they manage that is up to them, really. That's not really a planning issue. All we can control is they're switched off between certain hours. That's something definite that we can address via that condition. Whether that's done by a timer or manually is up to the surgery, I'm afraid, to manage. We can't go into that level of detail in terms of, they're either on or they're off at particular times, sensitive times. So that's what we can make sure happens.
Right, okay.
I'm quite certain that we'll be informed anyway via the local residents if that isn't the case. Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Chair. When we visited the site yesterday, there was quite a new build property, and one of the lights was very close to their boundary. I was just wondering if the option has been explored to put a lower level light in that particular place, purely because that wasn't so much in the car park, it was more on a footpath.
Oh, this.
Sorry, Councillor Kennedy, do we know which one we're talking about? Do you want me to put the diagram back on the screen?
This is the one on the bend on the driveway coming up, is it?
Yeah, that's right. As you come up the driveway, it was on the left, and I know Councillor Powell said that it was quite a newly built property.
Hasn't been there very well. There are two on the drive.
Yeah.
I think the lights built on
The one she's talking about
the extent of it.
is actually on the bend there.
Oops, go back.
I think the actual lamp units are going to be effectively targeted, aren't they? They're going to be positioned so there's... Yeah. I mean, to be fair, from that diagram there, you can see that the light's not spilling out beyond the site, so you wouldn't expect it, because they're only one lux as well. They'll be a lot less bright than the existing lights. They'll be focused more to light the immediate environs rather than spill out, as you can see from that diagram. There's also street lights on Brecon Road, normal street lights, which will be brighter and much higher than the actual lights on here, appreciating that the site is elevated. So I think they've done all they can really to address the issues, whilst providing a safe and usable environment for the occupiers of the users of the surgery there. Councillor Powell.
Yeah, I think if you think about looking yesterday, you'll see that the actual house itself is dropped down quite a bit. So that light, I don't think will be shining in their windows or anything anyway. But I don't think it's too close.
Okay, thank you for that. Anybody else? I got nobody else on my list.
Do we need to clarify what they want to do with the condition?
Yeah.
Can I just ask members, there's a mention of weekends in terms of the lighting condition. So just to clarify that the condition states that none of the lighting hereby approved shall be switched on between 2100 hours and 0700 hours in the morning, so 9 p.m. at night to 7 a.m. That is inclusive of weekends, so Monday to Friday. Is that a condition you would still like to see modified, addressed, or is that something that we're happy with as it's set out in the officer's report? Just check in before we go to a vote.
I think as long as it's clear that it does include weekends.
We can clarify including weekends, but yes, it doesn't specify Monday to Thursday, so that would be every day, but we can add including weekends just to make that very clear. So if that was acceptable, so the condition would include that. Was there a comment there?
Yeah, Councillor.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to. Didn't know if I had to put my hand up in the chat first. Yeah, I was going to. If you said including weekends, would that mean the lights would need to be on the weekends, or that they could be off on the weekends if the surgery isn't open? So essentially, we're requesting that the lights are not in use when the surgery is not in use. So it would need to be worded in that way, really.
If you added the words including weekends into the condition as it's written now, then they would be able to put the lights on in the daylight hours or the daytime, but they would have to be off between 9 p.m. and 7 a.m. as they would Monday to Friday. So they might choose not to put the lights on, but if they did, they could only be on within those time scales. So if members were minded that they did not want to have the lights on or any option to put the lights on the weekend, then the condition would need to be modified to reflect that. But if you are happy with the time restrictions that as they're set out that would apply to every day of the week, then we can add including weekends into the condition. Yeah, go on.
I'm just wondering if we're being a little bit over-restricted. What happens if they need to open the surgery for an emergency purpose at the weekends? They might, goodness knows, we could have, heaven forbid, have another pandemic for instance, or they might have a training day that they might need to use it, not necessarily a Sunday, but certainly a Saturday. So I'm wondering if if we're sort of straying into territory where we're being overly restrictive.
I agree.
Just a thought.
I agree. It's just
including weekends.
Just including weekends. I'm sure we'll cover it. Councillor Easton.
Yeah, I was basically on the same track as Councillor Bryn, in as much as where do we stop? Do we bring bank holidays in and public holidays, for example? Where do we stop? Where do we start?
So just to confirm then, I think Phil's point is very important, that the light restrictions between those hours would, on reflection, be applicable for every day, which we think is appropriate. Lovely.
Okay, thanks for that, everybody. Nobody else wishing to contribute now? Okay, in that case, can I have somebody propose that we, thank you, Councillor Powell and Councillor Howells. We'll have the voting function up then when you get a minute, Rich. Okay, we've got that now. Can everybody vote now, please?
I'll put my hand up for a minute because I've just lost my screen. Yes.
I've lost my...
So that's approved, it's unanimous.
Okay, thanks for that. The next one that we've got is DM 2023-01474, which is with the erection of 3 new dwellings with integral garages in 7 Crescent, Chepstow. And can I just check to make sure everybody has read the late correspondence on that? There was some clarification on the road surfacing and SAB consent. Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And just as a matter of point, just to confirm, the application for the 3 dwellings is with you, as it's exceeded the threshold of 5 households. So for any members who weren't able to attend site yesterday, or anyone watching online, I'll just quickly first run through the slides. The application site, apologies that's not edged in red there, but it's where Phil's very helpfully showing his cursor in the white polygon in the middle of the screen there. So that's the application site. Turning then to the next slide. So that shows the site layout. You'll note from the site section the sort of sloping topography of the site. What's perhaps not clear on that resolution is the scheme now included some renewable features, including solar PVs, EV charging points, and air source heat pumps. That is annotated on the plans, but I'm not sure that's quite clear on the resolution. Turning to the next slide, just to go through the main working drawings. So elevations showing what are 3-storey properties with integral ground floor parking spaces, and say the mixture of materials to the elevational treatments, and then the floor plans. So these would be 3-bed properties each, and you can see that on the lowest illustration there, that's the parking spaces. And there's, as you'll see in the report, there's conditions to ensure that those are retained for parking purposes, to make sure that the off-street parking complement is retained in the lifetime of the scheme. So here's some photographs here. So this is looking down towards the site. The site is the grassed area there on the right-hand side. Thanks, Phil. Just takes you, see the last property on the right there is number 58, which I'll touch upon that property shortly. The other photographs, that shows the relationship then next to that property. That's, say, to the right-hand side, is just stood at the front of the site, number 58, 7 Crescent. I think there's just a couple of photos there of the site, how it's been managed, and hopefully you can see from there the sort of the sloping nature of it as it slopes down towards the private lane. So, in terms of the application, as you know, the officer's report has a detailed assessment of all of the issues, so I'll just cover some of the principal and key pertinent planning matters. In principle, the site's within the development boundary for Chepstow, within which the principle of new build residential development is acceptable, subject to detailed considerations. The site is currently on the periphery of an edge of an area of amenity importance as designated by policy DES 2. Paragraph 6.6 of your officers committee report provides an assessment of the development against the criteria of this policy, which concludes that having regard to the criteria, as well as the planning permission that was previously granted for 2 dwellings on the site, there's no overriding conflict with the principles of policy DES 2. In terms of placemaking, as those members that were able to visit the site yesterday, the immediate built environment is generally characterised by rendered properties, although there are other properties with slightly different finishes in the vicinity. And whilst the proposed dwellings here are 3-storey, they would be built into the land, and their actual ridge line is comparable with that of the immediate neighbouring properties. And they would be lower than the 2 dwellings that were previously approved. And officers are satisfied that the mix of materials, as to not be solely render, would actually help to aid adding visual interest and breaking up the massing of the build. So on that basis, the introduction of the 3 dwellings is considered to respond to the existing built form, and that would actually complement the sense of place along Severn Crescent. The plot itself, though, is considered to be of sufficient size to site 3 dwellings, and the principle of small terraces of 3 is considered to be appropriate to the context, where there are other terraces of 3 in the locality. In terms of green infrastructure and biodiversity, an ecological site assessment has been submitted with the planning application and does identify the site as having potential for reptiles, nesting birds, and other common mammals. It's also worth noting, as is clear from the pictures, that it's adjacent to an area designated as ancient woodland. But no objection is offered by the Council's biodiversity officer. This is subject to conditions, including the management of lighting and a reptile mitigation strategy. Specifically to green infrastructure, as is required now by national planning policy, a GI statement has been provided. And although 2 trees would be lost, these have been reviewed by our tree officer, who has no objection to their removal. Additional landscaping, including new trees, would be provided, and condition 10 of the officer's report requires full details to be submitted for approval. There's also conditions for implementation and management of the soft landscaping. And crucially also, condition 13 is there to protect existing trees, ensuring that's done to the relevant British standard. So the application, therefore, in terms of landscape and GI and biodiversity is considered to be submitted with sufficient information to inform the planning decision, and subject to the conditions would accord with both local and national planning policy. In terms of residential amenity, it's important perhaps to just set out the policy context, and of relevance is criterion D of policy DES 1 that sets out that development proposals will be required to maintain reasonable levels of privacy and amenity of occupiers of neighbouring properties. And in this instance, the main consideration with regards to residential amenity is the impact on the neighbouring property to the north. That's number 58 Severn Crescent, and that's the property we saw in the slides earlier. So plot 3, which would be the closest to this, would have a side-to-side relationship with number 58, which follows that layout and orientation and rhythm of the street scene. The separation distance between the side boundaries, the buildings, would be approximately 2.5 metres, and this is the same as the previously approved scheme for 2 units, although the dwellings in this current proposal are lower than that previously approved. Officers are of the view that on balance, that this relationship would not give rise to unacceptable levels of overbearing. And whilst it's noted the distance 2.5 is fairly modest, don't feel that side-to-side relationship in this context would be sufficient to warrant withholding planning permission. And similarly, no windows are proposed in that elevation towards number 58, meaning that it would not introduce issues of loss of privacy, for example. So, on balance, officers recommend that the development is considered to accord with the amenity and privacy requirements of Policy DES 1 and also Policy EP1. In terms of transport, as I said at the outset, the site is within the development boundary for the town of Chepstow and therefore has access to amenities, etc., that are available by other modes other than by private motor vehicle. I think this town centre is approximately a 12-minute walk from the site. Chepstow also has bus and rail service for further onward journeys, and therefore the development is considered to accord with the principles of the sustainable transport hierarchy that's set out in Planning Policy Wales. In respect, though, of the private motor vehicle, the scheme's been amended following concerns raised by our highways engineers, and the integral garages on the ground floor have been amended to ensure that they are policy size compliant, so that each property can now achieve the required off-street parking provisions. You will note, though, members, as we just alluded to earlier, in late correspondence, an additional condition to agree details of the hard surfacing to the access area. This would require details of the surface to be also completed prior to any of the houses being brought into use. And also just to confirm that the extent of the new surfacing would be in front of the dwellings only. And I thought if you can just highlight. So that's the area there within the red line boundary of the application site. So that's the surfacing would be there. So the condition would require details to be submitted, agreed, and then implemented prior to the houses being brought into use. Finally, in terms of drainage and both foul and surface water from the development, these would be connected to the existing combined main sewers via pumping chambers. Surface water from everyday rain events would be discharged via rainwater harvesting, and any storm event up to and including a 1 in 30 year will be discharged via an attenuation tank, where surface water would be gradually recede onto the storm until the storm is concluded. Condition 3, you will note, is there to manage the rate at which surface water will communicate with the public sewage system, and accordingly, Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water offer no objection subject to this condition. The development would require separate consent under the SAB regime. Members, you'll have seen again in late correspondence that the SAB officer is satisfied that there is a means of surface water discharge, and that the full details would be agreed through a SAB application. Just in terms of affordable housing, given the scale and number of units proposed, it's required to make a financial contribution. Based on the 3 units, this would be for £24,220 towards local affordable housing in the local market, and this would be agreed via Section 106 agreement. So, on that basis, it is presented to members with a recommendation for approval, subject to the conditions both in the officer's report and the additional condition in late correspondence, and also signing of the Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. And, we've got no public speaking on this one, so it's open to members. Anybody got any points they wish to raise? Councillor Easton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is an adopted road, a private road, and highways have expressed some concerns about parking and not what off there. Will there be any determination in the future on this plan to adopt the road in terms of drainage, lighting? Is that an intention at all?
I know it's going to be renovated to highway standard, but I don't think there's any plans for adoption. Andrew?
No, if in the future that would be between the relevant landowners and the council's highway authority to enter into those relevant agreements under the Highways Act. So at this stage, it's as Councillor Murphy's explained, and it would be intended to be remaining private, and that condition there is we felt was crucial just to ensure that was delivered for residents from day one to make sure.
When you say private, is it private or housing association? Not sure.
It's private land.
Private. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Byrne.
Diolch, Chair. Further on that, when you say private, will the ownership within the red boundary be split into 3 and sold with each house and shared, or do we know if it would stay within the current ownership? I have 2 other questions. With regards to condition 5, will the lighting within this condition be dark sky compliant and therefore protect the ancient woodland behind from urbanised light pollution? And can you tell me the surface water condition number 3, should further protection be made to ensure that the soft landscaping within the plots remain permeable and preferably green, or does condition 12 provide that protection? My only concern is when we were on site yesterday, it was quite obvious that that what will be their back gardens once the houses are built will be in almost permanent shade, and so the temptation might be to just put hard standing on the whole plot. And so I was wondering what protections that we can offer going forward to try to ensure that some greenery remains and that it all remains permeable in the future. Diolch.
Andrew?
Yeah. Firstly, in terms of the ownership, that's ultimately down to that's a private matter between the land, how the landowner wishes to either sell it off as individual plots, retaining it as one ownership and rent it out, for example. That's beyond our control, and that's not something that we can involve or have influence over. They are open market houses, and it's for the landowner or owners to sell on those as they see fit. And the financial contribution for affordable is a separate matter that's relevant to us, and that's secured regardless through the 106 agreement. In terms of the lighting, I think the condition is satisfied. I know there is dark sky guidance that's recently been published. Obviously, when in the event permission is granted and the permission does get enacted, the lighting details would be subject to consultation with both ecology and our landscape GI officer, or landscape urban design officer, Andrew Neville. So we would be looking at the lighting and whether the suitability of it, and I say there is guidance now out on dark skies that will form a part of the planning process moving forward, so that will be taken into account. In terms of the permeable surface, well, as I said, the site in its entirety is going to need to achieve and obtain SAB consent to some extent. In terms of the management of the site, condition 12 is relevant here in terms of the maintenance. It's not just delivering planting and putting it out there. It's having that longer term maintenance and management of landscaping. Just looking through the other conditions that would provide, I appreciate the concern in terms of hard surfacing. The only condition that removes permitted development rights is respect of development carried under Part 2, which is fencing, walls, and other enclosures. The officer recommendation is not felt necessary to remove Part 1 permitted development rights for householders, that's extensions, alterations, including hard surfacing. Like I said, ultimately there's landscaping policies with management responsibilities attached to them. The surfacing, whatever the surfacing goes down, is going to need to meet SAB. So we feel I appreciate that it's a fair point given or more than fair point given the context of the woodland next to it. But I think officer view would be there's sufficient safeguards in the conditions as well as the SAB regime separately to safeguard against the concern raised.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Hurls.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I also share Councillor Bryn's concerns about the rear garden, so it's nice to hear that it's been addressed. With the construction management plan, I noticed there was a few comments from residents concerning safety aspect. Will there be some conditions regarding sort of deliveries and safety for pedestrians when large vehicles are going down there? I wonder if that could be specified. And also, I noticed that it is meeting the net biodiversity gain. Will the bat boxes and bird boxes be incorporated into the structure of the buildings, or are they just going to be put into the nearby forest trees? So just those two items, really.
Yeah, just looking at the drawings now for the bat boxes, and number of the bird boxes would be under the verge. I hadn't read it as being a sort of integral part of the building, but I mean the offering has been reviewed by our ecologist. Yeah, and the bat box is under the east, south of Ocean Innercourt. Yeah, so I haven't read it as being sort of integral part, but ultimately it's been reviewed by our in-house ecologists to their satisfaction. So I would only sort of, in that case, follow our statutory consultee's advice that the required levels of enhancement are appropriate to the site, the context, particularly with the woodland next to it, and that they are an appropriate form of and means of ecological enhancement. In terms of the CTMP, what it's seeking to manage is particularly times of delivery route. The delivery route will be what it will be given the nature of the location of the site. But crucially, it's the additional measures that are there to safeguard neighbour privacy as well as some highway safety. Hours of working is critical, and that would be included, but how they control noise and dust, etc., to ensure that there's no unacceptable disruption. I mean, building projects are subject to other legislation outside of the planning process that are covered by the Environmental Health Health and Safety Executive, that's what I was thinking of, sorry. Health and Safety Executive has also has guidance measures for neighbours in terms of building projects, so that would provide additional a layer of protection for neighbours. But the CTMP that we'd be consulting with our highways and environmental health colleagues, we'd need to be satisfied that it was robust, not to safeguard or cause harm to either, say, amenity or highway safety. So, yeah, sorry, Health and Safety Executive has other powers as well, which all building sites are required to adhere to.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question, really. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do a site visit yesterday, so I'm not quite clear on the road surfacing there. I noticed that the last house on the right, as you were before, the this proposed development. Sorry, are you still there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Okay.
Sorry, there was a blip on the signal there. Where does we see the house that's next door to it, and we see the road in front of that. The road in front of the existing house, that's the picture. Is that an adopted road or is that a private road? Is my question. And if it is, does it become a private road then as we see it going beyond the fencing there? Because the state of that road seems to be really quite bad, and I just wonder what will happen to the surface of that section when building is underway. So are there any sort of proposals to resurface that part of the road if it is a public road? Thank you.
Go on, Andrew.
Yeah, the so the improvements that are proposed and under this application are, so Phil's helpfully drawing a line there. That's where the improvements that this application is seeking will achieve, and that additional condition number 14, I think it is, will deliver. The surface in front of it there, I do note the comments in terms of the condition. Colleagues, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's outside of the adopted highway. So management of that and any issues with that would fall to the relevant interested parties that are the party to any sort of management agreement of that surface. So the planning application can only sort of improve and deliver what's within its red line, and certainly the planning conditions can only manage what's within the sort of application's ownership and control. So that's why, yeah, that's the diagram. So the surfacing will only cover that eastern hatched periphery on that plan there on screen. Hopefully that, apologies if that hasn't answered the question, please come back, but hopefully that answers the extent of what will be resurfaced and be improved and can be within this application's remit.
Okay, it just seems a little bit unfair to me that the people who are living there are going to have, you know, a certain amount of traffic that's obviously going to affect that stretch of surface there. Would they have any redress at all? It just doesn't seem fair to me. I know we can't condition that stretch of the road, but it's already in a very poor state.
Yeah, I mean, if there was any damage caused to that private highway through the development here or through any other activities, that would be a private sort of civil matter between the interested parties. If, say, construction traffic was to cause damage, that would need to be evidenced and then pursued through those appropriate legal channels.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, just checking here now. That extension to the bit that's going to be resurfaced only services one property. I don't know whether that clears it up for you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Garrett.
I was just going to echo what Councillor Butler was saying about the road, but that's been answered. I think, you know, there's 3 clear potholes there, and I've had a similar situation in my area where there's an adopted road and the gas main has been replaced, and certain parts of it were left in a worse state than they were before. So I'd like to see, you know, at least the developer who's not here today acknowledge that there might be some repairs necessary for the residents. My other question was about universal bird bricks and whether that's something I note about the bird boxes on the side, as Councillor Howes was discussing, but as a policy in Monmouthshire, have we got any powers to ask for more developers to include universal bird bricks in their construction so we can protect the bird life? Because obviously in a wooded area there's going to be a lot of birds. We can do the most to mitigate and increase the potential habitat. That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, they've done a specific policy mandate in that particular form of enhancement. I mean, the Welsh planning policy is that the scheme should evidence and deliver overall ecological enhancement, and in this case, and that needs to be fully informed by, in this case, relevant survey work to identify what's needed and what's relevant to the context and the protected species on this site, and that has been done. And like I said earlier, the offering in terms of enhancements over the existing situation has been reviewed by our ecologists, who feel that it is overall achieving what the policy requires, and that is an overall enhancement. So to the direct point made, no, we don't have a specific policy. It is that broader overall enhancement, which you know, we take the advice seriously from our ecologists that is being delivered through this scheme.
Okay, thanks for that. Got nobody else indicating that they wish to speak. Councillor Bond has just come in. Welcome. So
just confirm it's got the extra condition.
Yeah. So we've got a recommendation for approval, noting that we've got the extra conditions. Can have a proposal that we approve, Councillor Powell, and seconded by Councillor Wright. Richard, can we have the voting function up, please? Okay, we've got that up now. Can everybody vote now, please?
So that's approved, unanimous.
Okay, thank you for that. We've got some reports now on appeal cases. And the first of them is going to be run through by Phil.
Thank you. Yes, it is. Hooray. Right, thank you. This is the appeal at the Boat Inn. Many of you will be familiar, those who don't just know Chepstow, but have been out and about with us and know the county more widely than just the local area. This is the riverside, the quayside really, overlooking the Wye, and this is an area known as the Back. You've got the Boat Inn on the right. In hospitality. Oh, sorry, I didn't know I was not on. Sorry about that. I think it was fair to say it was sort of like tolerated for a while to help the hospitality businesses. You know.
Sorry, Phil. Is it possible to start again because we've missed all of that? Right.
Oh, right.
Really sorry.
Oh, and I was in full flow as well. Dear. Right, I'll start again. Right. So. This is the quayside, so it's an area known as the Back in Chepstow. I hope it's familiar to most of you. You can see the water in the River Wye that this area overlooks, and it looks on to the river cliffs at Sedbury of the other side. And you've got the Boat Inn, which is an historic pub, hostelry on the right-hand side, and that's a sitting out area that's rented from the council by the pub for its business. And during COVID, the business put up that structure which allowed an outside area that could be used during more inclement weather. And it was fair to say that we tolerated that during the COVID period and post-COVID period to allow hospitality businesses to recover, and including that one there. However, it got to a stage where we did say, look, you need to actually do something different. That's not really something we want to see. They applied retrospectively to retain it, and it did get refused and then went to appeal. And we've now had the appeal back from the inspector, and the inspector found there were a few issues. There was a lot of support for the structure, but there was also a lot of opposition to it, if you like. It's longer-term retention. And there were a few issues. There were some concerns from local users of the riverbank that it restricted access to the riverbank to launch boats. There's a sort of little pier down there where boats were launched. And interestingly, the inspector didn't find that was a critical issue to actually determine this appeal negatively. What they did say, whilst the marquee presents an impediment, it would be possible to lift items over the wall before entering it, and access to the riverbank is not precluded. And he didn't find that access is so restricted such that the appeal should be dismissed on that particular ground. However, fundamentally, the inspector did agree with officers that the gap between the river and the buildings overlooking the bank creates a pleasing sense of openness and is fundamental to retaining the open views up and down the river, which is specifically referred to in the conservation area appraisal that is supplementary planning guidance to our local development plan. And we've got lots of these conservation area appraisals for a lot of the larger settlements, Abergavenny, Monmouth, Chepstow, for instance. And he does say the willow adjoining the marquee is a significant feature in these views, but adds to the attractiveness of the riverbank. And this is a key point. The large, shiny marquee despite its open three sides, intrudes into this space and interrupts views along the river. And further, the overtly modern materials and ugly bottle cage fail to respect the historic setting, contrasting unfavourably with the character of and traditional materials in the Boat Inn and other listed buildings nearby. So in other words, he found harm to the conservation area and the setting of other listed buildings in the area. And it was so harmful that it warranted dismissal of the appeal. So that's that in a nutshell. Has anybody got any queries about that?
No, quite straightforward. There was one that didn't go our way, Andrew.
Yes, members, you might recall this when this came to Planning Committee in November, I think it was. It was for two elements. It was a householder application, so there's two elements to it. It was a porch to the front of the property and a two-storey rear extension. So we resolved at our level to issue a split decision to approve the porch to the front and the, you can see on those plans, it's a very, very small, modest porch front. So that was approved, and the rear two-storey extension was refused. We were concerned officers, and that was endorsed by ourselves, that the scale and mass, given its relationship with the boundary to the property to the north, would fail to maintain reasonable levels of amenity of the neighbouring property. However, the appointed inspector didn't agree with that and has granted planning permission for all of the elements, including the porch. Just a couple of takeaways from the inspector's sort of assessment for doing so. It did state that while some additional shading during the summer months, this would be limited to a few hours during the middle of the day, and therefore was not persuaded that the proposal would cause a demonstrable and significant reduction in levels of sunlight or daylight. Also noted that it would, their view, would not unacceptably loom over number 3's occupants. So, and yeah, so that was allowed in its entirety rather than the split decision that we had issued. So, I don't know if there was any comments or observations on that one.
Comments, anybody? No? Okay, in that case, we'll go to the Miller's Arms. Well, not literally, but we will.
Yeah, so those again who are familiar with Matham will know the Miller's Arms. It's described by the inspector as being simple in design, but it's a key landmark in this part of the conservation area. So again, we're talking about impact on conservation areas. And it's elevated and visually prominent with an attractive front elevation. So there we are. So there's the Millers, and then there's that structure next to it. So the appeal was subject to retention of that timber building, which is used as an outdoor seating area for the pub. So we refused the application. Have we served an enforcement notice? Do we know? No. We haven't yet served an enforcement notice. So, when viewed from the main road, the pub, along with the land to its front and side, makes an important contribution to both the character and appearance of the conservation area. But they said that the scale and elevated position of the building relative to the main road make it a highly prominent feature within this part of the conservation area, and its substantial size and shallow pitch roof competes visually with the pub, diminishing its contribution as an important and locally significant landmark. And this impact is further exacerbated by the building's position forward of the pub's frontage, disrupting the established building line and drawing attention away from the more traditional form of the host building. And he concluded that whilst ancillary structures can, in principle, be accommodated within conservation areas, and it is reasonable for simple functional buildings to reflect their purpose, this development scale, position and design prevent it from being either complementary or subservient to the host building. And as a result, it appears as a large, prominent, discordant, modern structure that harms the established character of the conservation area and streetscape. So that was that.
Okay, anybody comment on that? In which case, we'll go to the last one, which is Badgers Walk, Undy and Phil again?
Yes, so that was Badgers Walk, Undy. So there was a proposed change of use of number 6 Badgers Walk, which is off a private drive off the main part of Badgers Walk as you come in from the main road. It's a 4-bedroom house at the moment, which would be use class C3, and it was proposed to change it to a C4 use class HMO, house in multiple occupation, for up to 6 occupiers. And you'll recall that whilst we've approved these in the past, they've generally been in locations, 1, where they provided a reasonable degree of off-street parking, and 2, they've also been much closer to town centres. I'm just thinking of the ones, for instance, in Chepstow we've approved. We could literally walk into the centre within 5 minutes. This is a much less central location, and the inspector did place great emphasis on the lack of ability for this to actually accommodate all the off-street parking that was required for this type of use. And it was quite interesting that the inspector came up with this sort of assessment, and he said, unlike student accommodation, which is typically managed with restrictions on car ownership and located in areas with access to alternative transport arrangements, the proposed HMO would function as a shared residential property with no such controls, and its residents would have greater independence, and their transport needs and car ownership patterns are likely to differ significantly from those, for instance, of students in purpose-built accommodation. And he didn't agree with the appellant that the proposed HMO would be comparable to a 4-bedroom dwelling occupied by a single household. And the view was that 6 individuals living independently would be unlikely to share vehicles and journeys in the same way as a single household, which would reasonably be expected to significantly then increase the demand for parking spaces compared to the existing situation with one household occupying it. So given the similarities in terms of individual households, I consider a requirement for 6 parking spaces as based on the council's supplementary planning guidance requirements for self-contained flats would be appropriate. So that's quite an interesting conclusion in this, and I think you've got to look at the context here, because it is in suburbia. It's not particularly close to shops and services, and it's not particularly it would have been quite a long walk to get to the bus stop. So it's quite unlike the HMOs that we have approved in this committee in other scenarios. And in terms of looking at the availability of off-street parking, it was clear that this couldn't accommodate anywhere near the 6 spaces proposed, and even the use of the garage was questionable, because with people parking in front of it who are not related in any sense, in any relationship to the person who's put the car in the garage, it was likely that wouldn't be sustainable to manage. So that, there'd be on-street parking spilling out from this sort of use, and he assessed that, and it was already evident that people were already parking on pavements opposite existing driveways, and that was causing parking stress in the area. So we didn't feel that it was suitable, therefore, to allow a reduction in the requirement for off-street parking, in this instance, and it was dismissed owing to lack of parking facilities.
Okay, thanks, Phil. So that's got everybody up to date on that. That's the end of the formal part of the meeting. Can everybody just stay where they are a minute, because we just got a few things to discuss once we've stopped recording. Richard?